Welcome to A-State Sports Take. I'm Gavin Grubbs, your host. This week, just yesterday, actually, the college football playoff was announced. The number 1 seed, Alabama Crimson Tide, are taking on the number 4 seed, Cincinnati Bearcats, in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl for a chance to play the winner of the Orange Bowl between the number 2 Michigan Wolverines and the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs. Do you think the College Football Committee got the teams right and in the right order? And if not, what would you change, and who do you have in your 4-team college football playoff?
Number 1, I have Alabama. Number 2, I have Georgia. Number 3, I have Michigan. Number 4, I have Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to what I think the playoff is. I think the playoff got it right. You know, you're looking back, Georgia lost the game to Alabama, and Alabama just looked tough. They looked like the Alabama we've all come to know and love, and Georgia just didn't have it in them that day. Michigan absolutely smoked the brains out of Iowa. They were up 42-3, just not even a football game. I think Michigan definitely deserves to be there. And then finally, you've got a Cincinnati team that went 13-0. You know, you're going to probably see some people say that they're the only undefeated team. Why are they number 4? But I believe that the committee did get it right, just because Cincinnati, their strength of schedule just wasn't up to par with these other 3 teams. You know, Michigan plays teams like Ohio State, Penn State, some of these better teams from the Big Ten, Georgia and Alabama. You play a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. And then you got Cincinnati coming from the American Athletic Conference. I think some people are going to say Cincinnati got disrespected. I'm going to say that Cincinnati actually got favored by their lack of schedule, because if they actually played some better teams, I don't think they would have been undefeated.
I wouldn't go with favored, but I will agree with you that their schedule isn't as hard, considering you have to play against SEC teams, Ohio State, all those great teams in those conferences. So them being at the spot that they're put in, I agree with you. They weren't favored, but I will say that their spot is definitely where they need to be, even though they were an undefeated team. Georgia, Alabama, I would put them at the 1-2, Alabama first, Georgia 2. I mean, as we all know, the committee's probably going to want, Alabama, Georgia go head-to-head, the 2 SEC teams to go in. More ratings, more views. It's the two greatest teams, college football history. But at the same time, I still would put Georgia 2, Bama 1. That's just my take on it.
I think I would agree. For me, it's Alabama all the way. So.
Yeah, see, the only thing for me, though, is Georgia lost this weekend and Michigan won, and I think that's the only reason the playoff put them ahead. I do say that I think Georgia will win the matchup, but with Michigan's just incredible performance against Iowa, I mean, when you put up 39 on a team that's supposed to be the second best in your conference, I think you definitely solidified your spot at number 2, maybe even number 1 if Alabama hadn't played up to their caliber on Saturday. But I do think that it's going to be a fun playoff for sure. I do think Alabama will wipe the floor with Cincinnati. That's going to be my bold take. I don't think Cincinnati's going to play tough at all. I think Nick Saban's going to get the job done. And then I think Georgia's also going to take care of Michigan. Michigan, I don't think has seen a defense as tough as this Georgia one, and I think the Georgia D-line is just going to be too much for Michigan's offense.
I'm rooting for the underdogs here. Jim Harbaugh has been trying to get into the playoffs for the longest time now. He's here. This is his time to shine. And then Cincinnati, when's the last time you heard of a team in this type of conference going to meet against some of the greatest teams in the best conference? I'm rooting for the underdogs here. I'm hoping to see Cincinnati and Michigan duke it out in the end. That's what I'm hoping to see. We've all seen Nick Saban. We've all seen Georgia. We've seen them go there to the championship however many times now. It's about time we see some underdogs going there. Why don't you say?
Yeah, I just with the amount of talent that Georgia and Alabama have, I just see it's going to be tough. Now, Cincinnati, we will say Cincinnati last year in their bowl game, they gave Georgia a run for their money. I'd say that was a different Georgia team, and I'd say it's a little bit different of a Cincinnati team too. I just don't see how Cincinnati will be able to compete. I think Cincinnati all year has wanted this, and they're finally getting it. So I'm excited to see it. But they got to prove it to me before I'll say anything. But I definitely think it's going to be a lot less close than the Georgia-Michigan game.
And one thing I want to add to this conversation is, who do you think the best non-playoff team is? Who's the best team that got left out of the playoffs, and somebody you think could potentially beat some of the playoff teams if they had an opportunity?
That's a good question. Obviously, there's teams like Auburn, Who else got left out? I'm not exactly sure who else got left out.
Well, so Notre Dame was number 5. They went 11-1. They lost to Cincinnati, so arguably, obviously, they should have been left out. Number 6 was Oklahoma State. Was in a prime position to go make it into the playoffs. One of the things I said is Alabama would have to lose. They did win, but Oklahoma State also lost to Baylor. I will say Oklahoma State would probably be my team, just because the defense is very good on Oklahoma State's team, and that's what's really kept them in a lot of their games. We saw against Oklahoma, defense won it for them down the stretch. Baylor, they couldn't quite get it done, but their defense really, I think that they stood in there, and I think they got the job done almost, but Baylor pulled it out in the end. I can't remember exactly how the game ended now that I'm thinking about it, but I do remember that Baylor won. So even though Oklahoma State lost, that's probably the team that I would say, even though they are number 6 in the rankings.
That Oklahoma State team, they did come a little bit different. They came a little bit harder this year. I remember watching that Oklahoma State-Oklahoma game. It was a great shootout all the way to the end. Like you said, the defense came in clutch in the end whenever they needed them to be. Didn't see much in Notre Dame, but hearing their record, obviously it guarantees them, I wouldn't say guarantee them, but gives them an honorable mention in this conversation here.
Yeah, and then there's also, Ohio State, another Big Ten team that you could argue was really good this year. Did lose to Michigan. I can't remember what their second loss was, but I remember that was not expected, which is why they're not in the conversation we're having today. But Ohio State would also be a good team. But, like I said, with the way Michigan played them and the way Michigan defeated them at home, I just don't see how Ohio State would have been able to compete in the playoffs as well.
Definitely expected more from them, considering that they had a Heisman runner going for them. Ohio State's always been in those type of conversations with the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Notre Dames, and all those top teams. But this year they just didn't have anything to come around. Nothing just clicked for them all the way through.
All right, and I'm going to have to cut it off for you guys there. One last question I have for everybody is, what are your predictions for the 2 semifinal matchups and your prediction for the national championship?
I'll go ahead and say mine first. I think Georgia's going to beat Cincinnati. I don't think it's going to be close. I'm going to say Bryce Young puts up 42 on the Cincinnati defense. Cincinnati only answers with 21. It's going to be a 42-21 game. And then we've got Georgia-Michigan. I think it's definitely going to be a closer game. In the past, Georgia has played their semifinal games close. A couple have gone into overtime, but Georgia always finds a way to pull it out in the end. So I'm going to give Georgia the nod on this one. A little more defensive, tenacious game. I'm going to say Georgia with the victory, 24-21.
You got some really good predictions here, but I'm gonna have to disagree with you only on one. I will agree Alabama is gonna put up the fight on them. Cincinnati, I don't think it's gonna be that much of a stretch of a game. I really think it's gonna be a little bit closer. If Cincinnati comes out, had they been coming out the entire year, keeps it up how they've been doing it, they should be able to make it a close game. I still have Alabama pulling it out. But with the Georgia-Michigan game, I don't know, because in playoff times, Georgia, sometimes, they have the tendency to, have some flukes here and there late in the game. Michigan might be able to pull it out, so I'm hoping I'm thinking they can do it. I'm going with Michigan over Georgia and Alabama over Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. I think Alabama is definitely going to pull off a big win. However, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if something changes, because they are coming off of a loss, and they're the only team coming off of a loss into this game. So, you just never know what can happen.
Sure.
I think Alabama, honestly. I just think that because how many national championships have they won over the previous years and everything like that. And I think it's going to be an easy game. Some people wake up with different feelings. So if they come out ready to play hard, and they can pull it off. So I give it to Alabama.
All right, that's going to end our first segment on A-State Sports Take. We will continue the debate after the commercial break.
today's Sports Take. I'm your host, Daisha Pettis, and we are going to continue the conversation about the bowl games and the predictions that everybody have. And we're going to start with Hope.
I think the lineup for the playoffs is going to be really good. I mean, we have Alabama with Cincinnati, which it's 1 against 4. But also, Cincinnati's the only one in the playoffs who hasn't lost a game, and so that's very confusing for me. But we also have Michigan and Georgia, and I think that's going to be a pretty even battle.
Yeah, I think it will be somewhat of an even battle. I really don't think it would have mattered if they put Georgia second or fourth or whatever they are. What are they? Third. I don't think it really would have mattered if they switched the places because they still would have played the same team more than likely. But I do think Alabama is going to smoke Cincinnati, unfortunately, just because they're the only group of 5 team in there. I know they're going to become a Power 5 team, but Alabama and the SEC is just so dominating. But I think Michigan and Georgia will be a hard-fought game just because Michigan has had some big wins this year that they weren't supposed to have, and I think it'll be a good game.
For me, so personally, I think with the Alabama and Cincinnati game, I really hope that Cincinnati can really just beat Alabama in a way, just to shake it up a little bit. As far as the Michigan and Georgia game, I think that as far as the Michigan and Georgia game, I feel like Georgia will beat Michigan in my prediction.
All right, one thing that I think about the college football playoff is the committee did get the 4 teams right, but I'm not overly happy with the order of the teams. I think Alabama at 1 and Michigan at 2 is accurate, but if you look at Georgia being ranked 3rd and Cincinnati being ranked 4th, Georgia and Cincinnati prior to Championship Sunday Championship Saturday each have played 2 ranked opponents, and each were 2-0 against ranked opponents. However, one of Cincinnati's ranked wins was on the road against who is now ranked 5th, Notre Dame, and their second was a conference championship win against number 21 ranked Houston. Prior to that, Georgia's only wins against ranked teams were at a neutral site against 23rd ranked Clemson and at home against Arkansas, who is ranked 22nd. Cincinnati has actually had stronger schedule when it comes to wins against ranked opponents than Georgia, and Georgia lost against the only top 10 team they played, and it was in Atlanta, which is only an hour up the road from Athens, Georgia. So I would have Georgia at the 4 and Cincinnati at the 3, playing Michigan, and Georgia and Alabama having a rematch to avoid 2 teams who have already played once this year playing in the national championship. But I do think that Alabama will beat Cincinnati in the first matchup of the playoffs in the Cotton Bowl. But I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. The 2 teams that Alabama struggled against the most this year were Texas A&M and Arkansas. Cincinnati's offensive scheme is extremely similar to those, and they have a really solid defense. And then Georgia and Michigan, I think it's going to be a very, very physical game. I think it's going to come down to which coach doesn't choke when you have 2 coaches in Jim Harbaugh and Kirby Smart, who are notoriously both known for losing the big game.
Which do you think is a better schemer, though, when it comes to defining their opposing team, Smart or Harbaugh?
I think up until this season, it has been Kirby Smart, but this year we saw how Michigan beat Ohio State and went 11-1 in the regular season, and I think Jim Harbaugh finally has the team that he wants and the team that he got to personally hand build at Michigan. It took him a few years longer than expected, but I think Michigan and Jim Harbaugh might be my championship pick for the college football playoff.
Something that only concerns me, though, is that the SEC can recruit the biggest, the baddest players just because it's the SEC. Like Alabama and your Georgias, they're going to have their top recruiting class, whereas the Michigans are going to have to be a better schemer, better planners, and do things that are a little more creative and less of a bully style of football play. Do you think that's going to have an impact in these games?
You can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not sure. I'm completely pulling this statistic out of my butt. But I think the Big Ten has had as many top 10 recruiting classes as Alabama and Georgia over the past 5 seasons, especially being Michigan, one of those 2 teams, and Ohio State being the other. They're the only non-SEC teams that are able to recruit toe-to-toe with the SEC. And in bowl games, the SEC and Big Ten are pretty close to 500 against each other. And as you look back on the regular season, when two teams out of the SEC and Big Ten, both who have the same record now, played, the Big Ten came out on top with Penn State beating Auburn.
So I hate to jump in, but who do you feel was the team that was left out?
The best non-playoff team, in my opinion, was probably Ohio State. And I know that they did have 2 losses, and Oklahoma State and Baylor had 2 losses, and Notre Dame only had 1. But I feel like Ohio State's going to prove in the Rose Bowl. I think they're going to blow out Utah. They played really close games against Michigan and then did really good all season. They're consistently in the top 5 in recruiting every year. I think Ohio State should have been ranked 5th or 6th and not all the way down at, I think, 9 where they ended up being ranked.
I would have loved to have seen Notre Dame just because Brian Kelly left and left them high and dry for their final couple of games of the season. And I kind of would have loved to see them go into the college playoff almost like a slap in the face to him, like, thanks for leaving us.
Yeah, I would have. I'm sorry. Yeah, I would have to agree. I would have wanted to see Notre Dame just to shake it up some more and really, like you said, really just be like, this is what you get for leaving us. Look at us now. But, you know, things happen, so that's what I would have picked.
Functionally, I know Notre Dame's the one who got left out because they're literally just 5th place. Yeah. But realistically, I know there are several teams that think they should have made the playoffs but didn't and are not deserving, one of those being University of Arkansas.
Far from it.
So who do y'all think would be the top 2 for the championships?
I mean, I hate to say it, but probably Alabama and Georgia, just because I just think it's written in the stars and so many people think that's what it's going to be. Now, would I like to see other teams? Yes. But do I think that will happen? Yes.
Personally, I would like to see, like, I know it's probably going to end up being Alabama and Georgia, but personally, I would probably like to see Cincinnati and Georgia or something, just to shake it up a little bit. But as far as just with the whole Alabama and Georgia, I hope that Georgia wins against Alabama because that would shock a lot of people, in my perspective.
I know Alabama's at the top spot right now, but I think they get a little bit too much hype, so I'm going to go with Michigan and Cincinnati because I feel like they have something they could pull there and actually make the top 2.
I think the championship game is actually going to ride on if Mechie is going to be able to play for Alabama. We saw him go down in the SEC championship game, and there were rumors that he tore his ACL and is going to be out for the remainder of the playoff, but I haven't seen any confirmation on that or not. And I think if he doesn't play, I think Cincinnati's going to beat Alabama. But if I think he plays, I think it's going to be the winner of Alabama and Cincinnati playing against Michigan in the national championship. And I think Jim Harbaugh is going to bring a championship to Ann Arbor.
All right, and that will be the end for this segment, and we'll be right back for another segment for A-State Sports Take.
Every day,
millions of people are connecting.
And even though we're overcoming obstacles,
watching each other's backs,
and banding together,
we should still make an effort.
To get to know each other
on a deeper level. Father,
cosplayer,
mentor,
actor.
It's time we take a step forward.
It's time we take a step forward.
Come together
and discover
how accepting our differences
can make us stronger.
We're all just trying to keep things running for those who rely on us. That's why we don't have time to be sick with the flu.
We don't have time for delays.
Ready!
We don't have time for spills.
Next.
We don't have time for setbacks. Let's be real.
Getting the flu shot
helps you fight the flu.
Get a flu shot for yourself and those around you too.
Welcome back here to A-State Sport Take, where we're going to continue our discussion on the college football playoffs. We've got a brand new set of presenters. Let's see what they think about the top 4. Tyler, why didn't you start us off?
So I really like this order for the top 4 teams. Alabama, I think, should be number 1 because of how badly they beat Georgia. and Michigan, number 2, Georgia number 3, Cincinnati number 4. I know Cincinnati's undefeated, but they're the only Group of 5 school in the playoffs at all. So they're really a good team, especially for where they're at. And I think being number 4 is really good. And Georgia having that lopsided loss when Michigan put the hammer down on Iowa, I think that's a good ranking, especially after this past week. I think Georgia's in the biggest kind of hole of what to do coming off this really bad loss against Alabama. When you've gone all season undefeated, and then in the SEC championship you have that bad of a choke. What do? How do you change your game up? Are you able to come back from that kind of thing? And so I think Kirby Smart's going to have that big decision of figuring out which quarterback to play, whether it's going to be Bennett or Daniels. And so I think that's really where the crux of everything lies, I think, is with Georgia, because I think Alabama beats Cincinnati pretty easily. I think Michigan and Georgia, if Georgia can get their stuff together, Georgia can beat Michigan. And I think if they get their stuff together, they can beat Alabama in the championship. But I think if Michigan beats Georgia, then Alabama's going to take the championship pretty easily.
See, I will have to say, more talking about on Georgia, like we know that they have one of like the best defense that has come around. And of course, like they're upset with Alabama because I know people were trying to, there's like, oh, Georgia's going to beat Alabama. You can never bet against Alabama, even if they're down and out. But I feel like if Georgia can, their defense doesn't need no work, but if their offense, if they can tweak some stuff and figure out, like you said, which quarterback they want to use and see how well like that plays out. Because Michigan, that is a team that's really like, I'll say like an underdog kind of sort of. And of course, like you said, like whenever they went against Iowa, it was just like they wanted that so bad. But if Georgia could tweak the offense, I feel like they could beat Michigan. And of course, we'll see Georgia and Bama again. And they just have to take it one step at a time.
Well, I think Georgia will be fine. I think they came in too high because they were blowing out a lot of good teams, and coming into it, I felt Alabama would get them because Nick Saban, he don't lose against his assistants but once, so. But when Georgia went up 10-0, I thought, oh, here we go. But Alabama said, okay, we still the top dogs, defending champs. You got to go through us. But I think, Michigan, they're a running team, so I think they'll be fine against Georgia. Cincinnati, Alabama, I think Alabama will get them. I have no problem with, the top 4 because, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, Cincinnati. I think it's perfect. But
Okay, so I think Georgia is the best team in these 4 teams because, there is a really good members in there. So, yeah, I will bet Georgia are going to win, I think.
And see, the one thing that I know people probably like really don't take notice of is that when you look at it, Cincinnati is the only team that's undefeated, which is to me that's surprising. But you have like Georgia and Michigan, they're both the same record. So I feel like if there could be an upset, I would pick, I would hope for that, maybe Cincinnati might beat Bama. That's a wild chance. But, you get the sense of like somebody that's come up and they get to take on Alabama. It's like, you can only go for the gold. And if they beat them, do you know how wild that would be? Mm-hmm. Like Cincinnati beats Bama, the one that's always been to like the national championships, that would be crazy. And
you can never rule out an upset because you see it time and time again in the college football playoffs. You see it in March Madness all the time, And so, it is very possible that Alabama loses to Cincinnati. How possible that is, I'm not sure. But Cincinnati, has had a really good season. And, they've been undefeated. They've had ranked wins in the top 10. And so,
guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
I was wondering, who do you think is the best team that maybe didn't make the top 4? Who do you think had the best shot? Tyler, we'll go back to you.
I think Notre Dame was really good. Of course, the whole Brian Kelly fiasco went off the deep end, so maybe that affected their placement. I think Notre Dame had a good team. I think Oklahoma State had a good team as well. But like I said earlier, I do think these top 4 teams, I think, are the right choices for the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I was very kind of hopeful, maybe Notre Dame, only because it's like, I can't think of a time like they being like, top 4, if they have. But but it's still like, they probably would have been like best suited, but I honestly feel that the top 4 of how it is right now, they deserve to be there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Notre Dame because the only loss they had was to an undefeated team, Cincinnati. But it'd been interesting to see them get in, not having a coach, So that would have been interesting. But I think it's Notre Dame, hands down, the best team left out.
So I'm kind of not sure about that. So I'm just gonna agree with them.
Yeah, UTSA had a really good run too.
Yes, and see, being from like San Antonio and like I know like down there the atmosphere that's just being whenever there was like undefeated, it's just like a hometown feel like, and that's like a first time a little bit minute. But UTSA being undefeated, gold.
Do you guys think Cincinnati is satisfied with being in the playoffs? So they might not, come with their best game, or you think they're out to win it?
That's a good question. I think they're definitely satisfied being in the playoffs, but I don't think, well, maybe not satisfied the right word. I think they're definitely proud to be in the playoffs, but I don't think anyone's ever satisfied with being number 4, until.
I mean, but you get in how you get in, and they definitely work their butts off to get in that position that they're in. I think that they're proud, but I think it's like, I hope that they don't psych themselves out because, they're going against Bama. They're going against number 1 right now. So I feel like I just don't want them to psych themselves out and just be like, oh, we're just happy we're here and call it a day, and they just give them, the spot. I just want to see like some fight within themselves and make it like a neck and neck game, honestly. Yeah. Make Georgia make Alabama have to like work for it.
For sure. Yeah.
So we've talked about who missed out, and we've talked about what you kind of see going ahead for the games, but who are your winners? Dasha, we'll start with you.
Honestly, I'm gonna go for the underdogs. I feel like mine is Georgia. Only because I feel like they can get through with Michigan, and they want that repeat with Bama. So I'm gonna go for Georgia for the win.
Okay. And when I got Alabama beating Cincinnati, I'm gonna go with Michigan over Georgia because I think it's finally, and then I'm gonna go with Michigan winning it all because that's why Michigan hired Jim Harbaugh, really, to be honest. A guy went to 3 AFC championship games when he coached San Francisco, went to a Super Bowl, won Coach of the Year in college football and NFL. So I think this is Michigan time. If Jim Harbaugh, gonna win it, this is time, I think.
For sure. Like I said earlier, I think the crux is how Georgia performs against Michigan. I think Michigan and Georgia can both beat Alabama in the championship if they, really want it. But at the end of the day, Alabama's already beaten Georgia once. So I think that's going to play really big to it if they have a repeat. And a lot of times, whenever you have 2 teams play each other in the same year, you see the loser come back and beat the winner. So I think if it's Alabama and Georgia, I think I'm going to go Georgia in the championship.
So I think Georgia are gonna win because, as I said, like there's a great members in there. So yes, I will bet Georgia.
And that's all we have time for today. I thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you to our multiple panels today. I've been your host, Louis Walker, and this has been A-State's Sports Take.